Hey, hope you're doing okay in this crazy world we're all living in. I want to do something a bit different today. First, we have not one, but two speed paints for you to watch. And second, because two speed paints gives me a bit more time, I'm going to take the opportunity to ramble about comic books, specifically the New Mutants. But before we continue, I want to give a spoiler warning. I'm going to be talking about Secret Wars, Secret Wars 2, and the New Mutants Volume 1, specifically issues 36 and 37, and will definitely spoil things if you haven't read those issues. In addition, the second speed paint could be considered a spoiler for the New Mutants movie. You have been warned. Anyway, today's pictures are of Anya Taylor-Joy as Illyana Rasputin from the New Mutants movie. Why these pictures? Well, Anya Taylor-Joy was one of the first portraits I did when I started this channel, and honestly, it was pretty bad. So I've been meaning to go back and have another go. And also, I've been a fan of the New Mutants since I was a kid, and I don't get nearly enough opportunities to tell people how great they are. Let's begin by talking about how Marvel comics were published in the UK in the 1980s. I guess it was probably possible to buy genuine American comics at a specialist comic store, but more readily available were the comics published by Marvel UK, which I could buy at my local newsagent. In the main, these were reprints of American Marvel comics, often including 2 or 3 different issues in whole or part, and sometimes with some Marvel UK original stuff thrown in there as well. And the 2 Marvel UK comics I remember most fondly, the 2 for which I read the entire run, were Transformers and Secret Wars. The Marvel UK version of Secret Wars was a reprint of the Marvel US limited series. Each issue contained half an issue of Secret Wars, written by Jim Shooter and penciled by Mike Zeck and Bob Layton, and half an issue of John Byrne's run on Alpha Flight. It also included a letters page, puzzles, and Secret Artist, which was great and which I wish I still owned. Anyway, the Secret Wars limited series came to an end with issue 31 of the UK comic, and the comic immediately segued into the follow-up, Secret Wars 2, starting in February 1986. And that first issue of Secret Wars 2, issue 32 of the UK comic, was my first encounter with the New Mutants and with Illyana Rasputin. A bit of background. The premise of Secret Wars is that a mysterious entity, known only as the Beyonder, transports a bunch of heroes and villains to Battleworld to prove who is stronger. If you haven't read the series, please go and read it. It's up there with some of the best crossover comics ever written, despite that hokey premise. Anyway, in the sequel, Secret Wars 2, the Beyonder decides to visit Earth to learn more about these human beings and the human condition. Obviously, the arrival of a being this powerful on our planet is a cause for some concern, and a whole collection of heroes from across the Marvel Universe converge to see what he wants. And that includes the New Mutants. This was my first encounter with these characters, but one moment from the issue really stuck with me. The Beyonder approaches Illyana Rasputin, puts his hand inside her and, well, let me quote the issue itself. Reaching inside to the core of Illyana Rasputin's being, the one from beyond draws forth the demonic essence which she has always kept hidden and fought with all her strength to deny, but which is clearly apparent to him. Helpless to resist, she becomes the Dark Child. We get one panel of Illyana in her demon form, all armour and horns and tail, and then, in the very next panel, she teleports everyone away. I mean, what? You can't just stop there. I have questions. Many questions. And possibly a new favourite character. But the issue isn't interested in answering my questions, preferring to focus instead on a battle between the other heroes and some guy called Thundersword. But not to worry. I only have to wait a week for the next issue and... that's not Illyana Rasputin. And, joy of joys, it looks like we're getting more Thundersword. In America, they got the core Secret Wars 2 limited series, which was a total of 9 issues, and a whole bunch of tie-in comics that were published at the same time. In the UK, we just had the one title, but they included all of the tie-ins as part of that title, and some of those tie-ins were really good. Some less so, but let's focus on the positive. After all, the whole point of this video is to talk about one of those tie-ins. Anyway, through Secret Wars 2, I got to meet characters like Cloak and Dagger, Doctor Strange, Power Pack, Hercules, and Rachel Summers, among many others. But the downside of all this content is that it took the best part of a year for the story to get back to that one character I was really interested in. Now, when people talk about classic New Mutant stories, they inevitably talk about the Demon Bear saga. And rightly so, it's an amazing piece of work. They might also talk about Inferno, or the New Mutants' first trip to Asgard, or the first appearance of Legion. And I love all those stories too. But there's one story that for me personally tops all of those, and yet doesn't seem to get a lot of love elsewhere. It's called If I Should Die, and it's the story I want to talk about today. And I said it at the top, but I'm going to say it again. Spoilers from this point on. If I Should Die was written by Chris Claremont, with art by Mary Wilshire and Bill Sienkiewicz. It was originally published in March 1986 in New Mutants issue 37, but I first read it in December of the same year as issue 75 of Marvel UK's Secret Wars 2. Because it's a Secret Wars 2 tie-in issue, the Beyonder is integral to the story. But to understand why, we need to first look at the previous issue by the same creative team, and a story called Subway to Salvation. Over the course of Secret Wars 2, the Beyonder has been struggling himself, trying to work out what it is to be human. He's tried indulging human wants and needs, tried being a superhero, tried falling in love, and now he has decided to set himself up as a messiah, bringing enlightenment to the people of Earth, to bring order to the chaos that confuses him. And he decides to start this plan with one Illyana Rasputin. Yes folks, some 40-odd issues of Secret Wars 2 later, she's finally back. Patience, I am told, is a virtue. The Beyonder abducts not just Illyana, but the entire subway car she's riding on. She, understandably, is less than happy to see him again, but once again, he rips the Dark Child out of her. Only this time, he literally rips it out and throws it away. He offers to restore her soul if she agrees to be his prophet and spread his gospel of universal consciousness. Now, there's a bit of a problem here. Illyana is the ruler of a demonic realm called Limbo. Taking away the Dark Child part of her also takes away her control of Limbo, leaving its inhabitants to run riot and start invading Earth. Illyana's soul sword and her responsibilities mystically transfer to her best friend Kitty Pryde. But Kitty hasn't spent years living in Limbo, training and mastering these powers. She tries her best to hold back the invading demons, but it's not enough. Meanwhile, at the X-Mansion, the remaining New Mutants are enjoying some time in the pool. Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, spots the flying subway car approaching, thinks that's kind of odd, as you would, and flies off to investigate. There he encounters Illyana, who converts him to the Beyonder's cause. Illyana and Sam try to persuade their friends to join the Beyonder's universal consciousness, but their friends point out that this sounds a lot like brainwashing. And then this giant demon shows up wearing Kitty Pryde as a necklace. Illyana realizes that the only way she can save everyone is to reject the Beyonder's gift and to take back the evil part of herself. Reluctantly, she does so, reclaiming her soul sword, cutting the demon in two and closing the gate that had allowed the demons to invade. I like Subway to Salvation, but I wouldn't say it's a great story. I think it's too short for its premise. We only get a handful of panels of Illyana and Sam trying to convince the other New Mutants before we see what's happened to Kitty. So we're never really in any doubt that the Beyonder's plan is a bad thing. Personally, I'd like to have seen them play up both sides of the argument a little more. One of the most interesting things about Secret Wars 2 is that it's a company-wide crossover without a villain. The Beyonder isn't evil. He's a child, and he simply doesn't understand the complexities of life and of being human. He genuinely believes that his decision to impose order and eliminate chaos is in humanity's best interests, and yet we don't even get a single panel of him making his case. So is it any wonder that we, as readers, are not sold on his argument? There are some big ideas at play here, and some do hit really well. The issue devotes 5 pages to Roberto da Costa, Sunspot, trying and failing to come to terms with the futility of life in the face of a being that can reshape reality on a whim. Chris Claremont is a fantastic writer, but he's also a wordy one, and his stories need room to breathe. Roberto's story gets that room. Unfortunately, Illyana's story does not. There simply isn't space in the issue to convey her dilemma. The text is unable to get across the extent of what she's being asked to give up to save her friend. Fortunately, the art team of Mary Wilshire and Bill Sienkiewicz are here to do the heavy lifting. Consider these 3 panels. On the left we have the stakes. Kit is suffering. In the middle we see the conflict, Illyana's despair at this no-win situation. And on the right we have her decision, at once triumphant and also tragic, as she takes back the demonic part of herself by choice. And her choice will have major consequences in the very next issue. If I Should Die opens with our heroes having a good time, laughing and joking while watching a John Wayne cowboy movie. It's worth pointing out that Danny Moonstar is Native American, and, in a nice touch, the script uses Rain to point out the racism inherent in the depiction of Native Americans in older cowboy movies. The X-Men family of comics are an allegory for racism and other discrimination, but sometimes that allegory gets lost in all the cosmic action-adventure. Quiet moments like this, especially when it's our heroes perpetrating the discrimination, can hit a little harder. This isn't about mutant hunting robots from the future. This is about ordinary people being blind to the consequences of their actions and then facing up to those consequences. Danny, who's also a Valkyrie, sees images of death hovering over her friends and runs away, only to be brought back by Sam. He apologises for his actions earlier in the issue, thinking that his thoughtless behaviour and that of his friends is what caused Danny to run off. And it's at this point that the Beyonder arrives, reminding the New Mutants of how they had rejected his path of glory. Illyana steps forward and begs the Beyonder to spare her friends and allow her to pay the price alone. The Beyonder disintegrates her with a glance. What follows are a dozen of the most brutal comic book pages I have ever read. The New Mutants try to fight back with mixed results. Shan dies attempting to save Danny's life. However, thanks mostly to Warlock, it looks like the New Mutants have finally defeated, maybe even killed, the Beyonder. And in another story, we might leave it there. Our heroes triumph against all the odds, but pay a terrible price, the lives of 2 of their friends. This comic isn't done with us yet, though. We get 1 page of quiet, 1 page to mourn, and then we get the splash page. The Beyonder, wreathed in shadow, earth falling off of him, eyes blazing. I have taken your measure, New Mutants, endured everything you could throw at me. Now, to use your own idiom, it's my turn. And methodically, brutally, one by one, he proceeds to murder the remaining New Mutants. It's a really powerful issue. I thought it was powerful when I read it as a kid, and it hasn't lost any of its power rereading it as an adult. Other than a brief interlude involving Sunspot, there is a sense of impending doom that pervades the entire issue. Sure, we get that false ending where it looks like the New Mutants have won, but however much we might hope, we know that isn't the case. The ending to this story is inevitable. Once again, the Beyonder's behaviour is that of a child. But this isn't a toddler having a temper tantrum, throwing his toys across the room. The Beyonder's actions are cold, almost emotionless. his justifications are those of a petulant adolescent. You made me do this. I had no choice. The New Mutants are teenagers. They make mistakes and a lot of bad choices. And yet, despite their youth, they have the maturity to recognize those mistakes, to take responsibility for them, and to try to put them right, as shown both in this issue and the one before it. The Beyonder does not make mistakes. It is humanity that is at fault, and he will remove anything that doesn't conform to his way of thinking. The concept of this issue is simple, and this gives the writing the room it needs to really sell it. Chris Claremont is back on form here, and every beat hits like a punch to the gut. However, once again, it's the combination of Wilshire and Sienkiewicz that really deserve all the plaudits. The art is phenomenal. The Beyonder's David Hasselhoff-like appearance has been a source of some ridicule. But there's nothing funny about the way he's pictured here. Depicted in shadow throughout, he's not a person. He's a force of nature, and he is genuinely terrifying. Mary Wilshire only penciled 3 issues of New Mutants, and, based on this performance, I wish she had had a longer run. The fear, anger, and despair is obvious in the faces and body language of her characters. The action is dynamic, the combat visceral. So many images from this issue have been seared into my memory for the past 35 years. Quiet moments like Amara making popcorn. Horrific moments like Danny entering the Beyonder's mind. Tragic moments like Rain on her knees praying for her life, or Doug's skeleton clutching Warlock's severed head. This is superhero comics. Death is cheap. Nobody stays dead in comics. And the truth is that, not long after, the Beyonder does in fact resurrect the New Mutants. But for me at least, that in no way lessens the impact of this issue. Usually, when a hero dies, it is some great moment of self-sacrifice. Jean Grey sacrifices herself to save the world from the Phoenix. Superman dies to protect everyone from Doomsday. Barry Allen ran himself to death to save the entire DC universe. The New Mutants don't get that. They don't save anything. They are just victims in a mad god's attempt to find himself. And that gives this issue a different feel to those other comic book deaths. It is haunting rather than epic, tragic rather than victorious. Yes, they come back. There are consequences for a while, but, as you'd expect, the status quo is soon restored. But none of that diminishes that final panel. The tragedy in that final narrative caption. In Colorado, William and Margaret Proudstar forget they ever had a daughter. In Manhattan, Roberto da Costa forgets his best friends. In Salem Center, virgin forest lines the shore of Breakstone Lake. Of Professor Xavier's school, of its youngest pupils, nothing remains. Not even memories. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about one of my favourite issues of comics. If you liked this format, please let me know. If I Should Die may be up at the top of my list, but it's not the only comic book that's important to me, so maybe I'll do this again sometime. And what about you? What are your favourite issues, New Mutants or otherwise? I would love to hear about them in the comments below. And if you've made it this far, please like and subscribe. It helps me to grow this channel and do more of the things I enjoy. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again soon.